Hi, my name's Tom, and in this lesson we're going to be talking about scale fragments that we can use in all fourths tuning on the guitar. It's a new way, or not necessarily new, but a really easy way of visualizing the neck without learning a ton of scale shapes. So if in standard tuning you ever felt yourself in the rut where, for example, I did, so I was in a position where I learnt the major scale pretty much all over the neck. I was really comfortable with the major scale and the modes of the major scale, so Dorian, Lydian, etc. I knew all 7 shapes of the 3-note per string, and I basically understood how the scale was constructed, so I got to a point where I was stopping to think of it in terms of, okay, I'm in position 5, blah blah blah, and I was just doing it fairly intuitively, and that took a lot of work to hammer into my playing. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are also in that position, but I'm also sure that a lot of you have probably, like me, looked into more outside sounding scales and things that fall outside of the realm of the major scale. Things like melodic minor, harmonic minor, all the symmetrical scales like the diminished, the augmented, the whole tone. So, in this lesson I'm hopefully going to articulate why this new tuning is the most beneficial for me as an improviser and a single note line player. It's got many other advantages, but this is where it really excels. Now, I'm going to take one scale shape and explain everything hopefully through that, and this is the one scale shape that I used all the time. In standard tuning, it's a 3-note per string scale shape. It would have been 3rd fret. I'm going to talk about it in G because that's frequently where I played in either G major or A Dorian, same notes. So 3rd fret on the low E, 5th and then 7th. Exactly the same on the A string. Then 4th, 5th, 7th on the D. 4th, 5th, 7th on the G. And then it would have been 5th, 7th, 8th, and 5th, 7th, 8th on the B and E, but now all moved down 1 fret. It's 4, 6, 7, and 4, 6, 7. So that whole scale looks like this slowly. Now, there is nearly enough information there. There's one extra little position that I'll talk about. Nearly enough information there for me, as soon as I switched to this tuning, to be instantly comfortable with it all across the neck. And basically, instead of thinking in terms of scale shapes and things and running up and down a whole six string scale shape, I think purely in terms of intervals and relationships of the scale, like a scale fragment for an octave, sometimes not even that big. And the realization came as soon as I changed my perception of where the root note was. Now, the root note in this scale, if we're playing in G major, is on the low E string. That's the most common one, and that's where visually I always used to anchor to in standard tuning. So right back down there. But obviously there's more than one G across the neck, and another one is here. So if I start to think of that as home, then I realised that if we take just these 4 notes, because these are the exact 4 notes that we would have been, 4 strings. These are the 4 strings that are exactly the same as standard tuning. So if we just take that shape, but start it all again with the root on the D string, then you notice that that's the point when the fretboard just sort of unlocked for me. And I sort of got this amazing realization that I'd been thinking of things in shapes, even when I thought I wasn't. I've been thinking of things in shapes far too much. So, and then further notes if I had the frets. So all these fragments now, instead of having to think like if I was going to start that on the D string last time, so I'm just taking the same patterns that we would have been using on the low 4 strings and starting them on the D string. Had I been in standard tuning, I would have had to have moved these top 2 notes, but because they're visually identical now, it made me realise that the whole, to visualise that the neck properly. We just need to think in terms of scale fragments. This is something that I picked up from John Petrucci's Rock Discipline DVD, which if you haven't checked out and you're really serious about practicing, I really would recommend it. It's fantastic. He talks about scale fragments in there, but he's obviously in standard tuning. So if I took, what I mean by a scale fragment is a small portion of a scale. So this would be a scale fragment. Not quite a full octave, but it's a 2-note fragment or shape that we can move around. It's not a full 6-string shape, it's not a whole thing that we need to memorize. And these fragments, there are, I would say that there's 3 of them, or 3 major ones in this shape that I've just talked about, this one here. There's the low 2 strings, and they're identical like patterns on each string. There's these 2 strings, and these 2 strings. And basically, if you start to make sense of where the root notes are, so here, here, and here, then whenever you encounter a root note, so let's say for example here, we know that we can start this pattern, because that's our root note here, or we can start this pattern, because we have a root note here within this pattern, so we could have gone, or, but then of course, if this note is exactly the same as this note, just an octave higher, then we can go, and we can repeat our scale from there. So instead of thinking of it in terms of patterns, try and think about where the root lies. So here's another shape of the major scale that we took from standard tuning, which is one that everyone learned to start off with, really. And we can just think of that, and then starting on the A, and hopefully if you just take these 3 fragments to start off with, so with a root being on our first finger and then ascending from there, our root being on our middle finger and ascending from there, and the root being on our little finger and ascending from there, just think of those 3 strings, these 3 sets of 2 strings, and just try and work out. So just take a G for example and go, okay, here's a G, so we can start this fragment here, but also we can start this one where we're on our middle finger, and obviously if we start this fragment, then we can continue and basically it unlocks the fretboard from there. So what I'm trying to articulate, and probably not doing a very good job, is that if you just break down the major scale or any scale you're using to its fundamental parts, so think of it in terms of intervals and think of it just in terms of 1 octave, you can expand the neck from there. So instead of having to learn, so let's say I wanted to start looking at melodic minor, instead of having to learn melodic minor all over the neck in 6 different positions, 3 notes per string, and then positions diagonally this way and diagonally this way, you just need to think of it logically. So if we take our melodic minor and look at that now, I'll look at it in B just for ease. I like to think of melodic minor as a major scale with a flattened third. So whenever we get to the octave, we can start again. And then within that I can look at the patterns between, so for example I've been looking at it like this is our fragment, but I could take this as our fragment. So this is our home note. So if we look at another B somewhere, so we could go, And no longer does the fretboard seem daunting in terms of learning the positions of all these things. It starts to become a lot more accessible. So my suggestion for you this week is, if you're wanting to learn a new scale, just learn 1 octave of it in standard tuning on the low few strings, and try and extrapolate that, because there's enough information there for you to know it across the whole neck. If you just extrapolate that as far as you can, you'll start to unlock things for yourself. Similar to when I had the realization that is exactly the same as it sort of opens up a new world. It opens up a whole new world on the neck that you probably weren't aware that could be done. And certainly in standard tuning, because we had to, every time we had any notes between these two, we had to make concessions for that tuning. It made life a lot more difficult. So gone are the days where you have to sit and learn 7 positions or 7 3-note positions of these scales. You can just rely on just melodic fragments and just continuing them across the neck. So hopefully this has been useful. Next week we're going to look at something a little bit more different. This sort of ends the beginner section of this new tuning, and any lessons in this tuning for now will be just on a whim, basically. I want to look at jazz chords and talk about those at some point, because the way the intervals are presented in this tuning makes life a whole lot easier. So stay tuned for that. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.